One of our viewers requested, Dr. Paul, how do I help a child with ADHD without medication? I've got some ideas about that. When I shifted over to positive psychology, I quit giving diagnoses to my clients. I haven't done it in a decade. And yet my experience in child psychology had me working a lot with children diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Whether your child has a legitimate diagnosis or not, I think some of the principles that we can discuss here today are going to be helpful. And I'm starting with something that I've reiterated many times on this channel. Listen carefully. Your job as a parent is to love them, no matter what, and even if. We're starting with that because everything else I can share with you is simply manipulation if you lose track of that. That is so key, so essential. Don't be deceived into thinking your job is to make sure that anything, especially with an ADHD child, because you don't have that kind of control. Your job is to love them no matter what and even if. Focus in on that, hone in on it, and let's move from there and build some other skills. Here's another thing that I focus on in my coaching with parents all the time. Shift your focus. Is this about you as a parent, or is this about your child and your child's well-being? Shifting the focus from me as a parent over to my child puts me in a position of power and influence as a parent, but it also becomes much more palatable and attractive to the child, so you can have a better level of influence. This is easy to violate as a parents because we get so focused on what we want our kids to do. Well, notice where the focus is. If the focus is on what I want, what would be convenient for me, what would help my life as a parent, then I'm off. I got to shift that focus back over to my child. What is in my child's best interest? Now, I'm going to throw you a bone here as a parent because it is in your child's best interest for them to behave properly, for them to make better decisions, for them to cooperate and obey. That's in their interest. But that simple shift from what I want as a parent to what's best for my child, that is going to go a long way to help you help your child. The next thing I'm going to recommend is you work with a kid who has ADHD, or really any kid, is to get better at implementing consequences and doing that in a way that separates the emotion from the discipline. This is key because the emotional energy you take into a discipline setting is going to make a big difference on how well it is received by your child or the impact that it's going to have on what you're trying to accomplish in the first place. So let me give you a tool that's going to help with this. It's a phrase, and I want you to practice this phrase as often as you can in your parenting. Either way is really okay with me. Try it. Just try saying that. Either way is really okay with me. This implies a few things. It implies that you've just given them a choice, or you've just illuminated to them that they have a couple of different directions they can go. And you've also indicated that you're emotionally detached from the outcome. Either way is really okay with me. The psychology behind this is important because if you give your kid two choices and you're okay with one but not the other, which one are they going to pick? And how do they do this? They've got some uncanny ability to pick the one you don't want them to pick. Well, if you detach emotionally from the outcome, you really are okay with either way. Here's an example with a younger child. Buddy, you can get into the car under your own power or under my power. Either way is really okay with me. You know, I'm talking about a young child, maybe 3 years old. They got to get into a car seat. Can you enforce that? Yes, you can. That's why you're really okay with either way. He can get into the car on his own, fine with that. Or he can get into the car under my power, fine with that too. Here's another example, maybe using the same example. You can get into the car yelling and screaming and complaining, or quietly and peacefully. Either way is really okay with me. Now, normally you're not okay with the screaming and crying, right? But what if you were? Oh, that changes the energy and the dynamics of this interaction. So get okay with either way. You don't control whether your child is kicking and screaming or going cooperatively. Get okay with either way, and then it shifts the responsibility back to the child. Here's an example for an older kid. Honey, you can do the dishes on your own, or you can hire somebody else to do it for you. Either way is really okay with me. Okay, that's another great example for an older kid who's expected to help out with the dishes. And maybe she doesn't want to help out with the dishes. Well, notice I'm not giving her a choice of doing the dishes or not doing the dishes. I'm giving her a choice of doing it on her own or hiring someone else to do it. And there's some strategies on that second choice. Hiring someone else to do it, who is she going to hire? She probably doesn't know a dishwashing service that she can call up and prepay for services. So probably she's going to hire me if she chooses that option. See, and she hired me by default, and my fees are really high. So she probably doesn't want to hire me very many times. That has to do with following through with the consequences. And we go over that in some other videos and in the coaching and courses that we provide. So I won't go into a lot of detail about that now, but you get the feel, okay, where you can detach yourself from the outcome. While we're talking about discipline, let's get into something that I think is really going to help with ADHD kids, especially, but any kid who's got some executive functioning challenges, and what kid doesn't. We want to give them learning opportunities, and I like to structure these in a way that allows us to have some level of control and oversight. Here's an example of one that I've done with several kids who have been officially diagnosed with ADHD. I keep little self-sticky notes here at my office, and I have several at home too, where you can stick it to something like that. And with some of the kids that I've worked with, I'll take one of these notes and I'll write in my handwriting Monday, and then I'll tear it off and I'll stick it to them. Maybe it's stuck right there to their sleeve, okay? And then I'll write Tuesday, and I'll stick that one to their knee somewhere, and then Wednesday, and you get the picture, until I get a full week's worth of these little notes that have different days of the week written in my handwriting. And then I give them a challenge, and the challenge is to place this note on their mother's mirror by 7 o'clock a.m. every morning on the day that it's written. Mom's job is to check and see if the note's there, and if it is, she signs it and puts it back. Then the child's task is to take that note back before 8 o'clock p.m. with the signature on it. And then I put some parameters around that, like, Mom, you don't get to remind your child to either put the note up or to take it down. You don't get to do that. You just simply sign it if it's there by 7 o'clock a.m., and you do not sign it if it's not there by 7 o'clock a.m., no matter when it shows up. You are also to destroy the note if it's still there after 8 o'clock p.m. and no reminders. So you get how I kind of set this up. Probably the hardest part about this experiment is Mom not reminding the kids. Remember, what we're trying to do is train executive functioning. So in this particular learning experiment, we set up a reward at the end of the week if they have successfully done those tasks every day on their own without reminders. They get a fairly big payoff. And I usually have that payoff be something that Mom contributed a portion and the kid contributes a portion. Just to simplify it, this might be a school-age child, let's say 8, 9, 10 years old. Mom contributes $25. Kid contributes $25 or the equivalent thereof. So there's a $50 pot, and they get the whole thing if they successfully complete the challenge. They get nothing if they fail. Interesting experiment both for the child and for the mom. With attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or any executive functioning problem that kids have, we're really trying to help them start to turn on their own executive ability to monitor their own behavior. So this is just an example of how to set up a specific learning opportunity. Now finally, I think ADHD is overdiagnosed typically in our society. I think it's one way that we say, hey, it's hard for me to deal with this kid's behaviors. But there are some kids who legitimately have a diagnosis that has something to do with the way their brain is working. So I want you at the end of this video to consider the medication. I'm not saying you should get it, but remember we started this out with how do I help a kid with ADHD without medication? That's what we've been talking about in the video. But when push comes to shove, if this is a legitimate diagnosis, and if you've tried a number of these things without success, the research shows that untreated attention deficit hyperactivity disorder leads to a much higher risk of disruptive behavior in the future, including illegal activity, substance abuse, self-injurious behavior. There are a lot of things we don't want to have happen if it goes untreated. So try these things, but be open to and consider the possibility of medication, and consult with a qualified medical professional about that if that becomes the issue for you. We've got other videos on this and other topics in the Positive Parenting playlist. Make sure that you check that out. And if you haven't yet got a copy of my book, Pathological Positivity, that is a great place to start as you consider other options like coaching or programs that are available. Get this one first. drpauljenkins.com. There's a link in the description. Click on the big orange button once you get there, and let's get this into your hands as soon as possible.